Uh, Isn't there any way that we can agree with them and
Not right now, because we're up on, like, yeah.
Was that a hot mic moment? Is there any way we could agree with them? Ooh, I wonder what that was about.
like that?
No.
Well, it's not testimony. So.
What is written here is what she said.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
do you recall independently that?
I beg your pardon.
Do you have, does that refresh your recollection?
What comes to me as I read this is that the reason that I can't cite chapter and verses, it is wildly psychotic. It is incoherent. It is
non-responsive.
well.
Saying, if you can relate what Maria told you, I think was the question, that's what you need to do.
And no, so let me rephrase that then, Dr. Lewis.
I kind of know what she's saying. Because Letecia's stories are so crazy and all over the place, how do you recite that accurately?
More scary persona, and then it is just rambling and doesn't make sense and incoherent or psychotic.
She said incoherent or psychotic. I'm not going to necessarily say that she's for sure equating those things. I just want to point out that those things are not equal. You can be incoherent, you can be rambling, you can be an idiot, you cannot make sense, but that doesn't make you psychotic. No, her stories don't make sense, and I think sometimes they're designed that way.
Things happen. Very often they can be aggressive things, they can be repetitive things. And subsequent to that, the person does not remember them or remembers them in a confused fashion. And the reason that I would like very much to have been able to investigate that is, if it were.
When they remember in that confused fashion, they don't, if they've had a seizure, they don't invent complex stories. Earlier you heard about alcoholics rambling. Yes, that happens in certain brain injuries. That happens. But these stories are, there's a reason for Letecia's stories. And so, kind of rambling after a seizure or not remembering or not making sense, that doesn't really make sense to me, just having heard so many of her stories and seeing her rationale behind it. But she's an expert. Maybe she saw something different than what we've all seen. Let's see.
That during this time when the child was being stabbed, that her brain was in an altered state, and that there is no way in hell that she could have stopped what she was doing. And the other thing is, she would not remember it. And
okay. If she's talking about that kind of seizure and that automatic reaction, there have been cases where somebody has struck somebody repeatedly or stabbed somebody repeatedly, and she's right. They wouldn't be able to stop themselves. It's not like they're doing it with any intention to kill necessarily. But they don't stop that repetitive behavior to go away and get another weapon and then another weapon and then hide the person. And, like, if you wake up and you had a seizure or you had a psychotic break and you have no memory of what happened, I mean, you've got a crime scene, right? You have to do something about that. You have to try and make sense of that. It would be horrifying. So I don't know. She still hasn't convinced me.
Whereas we're in a lot more trouble when we're dealing only with a dissociative identity disorder. That's a very tough one to treat. It takes a certain amount of experience, talent, what have you, and investment for a long period of time.
That's true. The other thing that's true is that to get a diagnosis for sometimes that takes years. And earlier, I think I said, people will hear voices because they're hearing the elders talk to each other and it scares them and they go for therapy. And you see this long string of lack of understanding or a misdiagnosis or trying different meds because they think it's chemistry. And then it takes therapy in order to get the alters to actually emerge and show themselves and get more of an explanation. So it's interesting that Letecia's alters seemed to show themselves at a very convenient time without all that therapy.
Despite not having the EEG or the MRI, in your report, you indicated that Ms. Stauch was one of the most mentally ill people you'd ever come across.
Yes, the most complex.
Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes. The more I study her and the more I remember what happened and go over it, she has such a variety of different signs, symptoms, and behaviors. She has many of the signs, symptoms, behaviors of a dissociative identity disorder. She also, if you follow the
She could have many signs, symptoms, and behaviors of a variety of mental illnesses because she doesn't know which symptoms she's supposed to fake in conjunction with each other. That is a possibility. I'll see what she says.
material affairs,
Despite that, are you able to come with an expert opinion regarding her sanity at the time of the death of Gannon?
yes.
What is your opinion?
Well, I think that she was that assuming that this area is about the time that Gannon was killed.
Yes.
She was psychotic at the time. She was not in touch with reality, and she did not. I don't think she knew the difference between right and wrong. I don't know whether she even knew what she was doing.
Those are powerful words. She's psychotic. She didn't know the difference between right and wrong. Maybe she didn't even know what she was doing. That's powerful. If that was the case, this situation would be even more tragic than it already is. But she also said, assuming this area was there, and she's referring to that MRI and EEG that wasn't done. So am I misunderstanding here that she's seeing all this crazy behavior and it looks like a number of illnesses, and because it's so crazy and complex, she thinks there's something wrong in the brain, which is a sensible thing to do. And she wants this MRI and EEG to in order to make a determination. And for whatever reason, she can't get it. And so instead of saying I can't come to a conclusion because I need this information, she assumes that the defect is there. And then, wow, okay.
Aspects.
Well, tell us the elements. This is what you're here for. You're here to testify that this defendant was sane at the time she committed this crime. I'd like you to explain to the jury now what law you used in rendering that opinion.
Would you permit me to read it, and I will tell you what aspects of it I
You're the expert, doctor.
concentrated on. I, by and large, I used
He's putting her on the hook and not letting her off here.
to come to that conclusion, and then try to go word by word with the definition. Yes, you would try to use that. Here we were using as much data as we could get. And again, if
She just admitted they had incomplete data. Okay.
I'm mistaken and it is not an understanding of the nature of what the person is doing and that it is wrong, then I've made an error.
Well, this is what you say about insanity in your report. You say, based upon the evidence that I reviewed, in my opinion, Ms. Stauch was insane at the time of the homicide and the days following, period.
That's right.
So that wording is important. It's going to be standard based upon the evidence that I reviewed or based upon the evidence available. It sort of protects everybody in a way. Any assessment, regardless of what you're assessing, is only as good as the information you have. So if there's some other important piece of information that she never heard about, that she never had, and it's critical, it kind of protects her because she's saying, look, I can only base an assessment on the information you give me. Every assessment is only as good as the information you've got. I don't know if anybody cares about that stuff, but I just told you.
And I believe that at the time she was psychotic. And whether you use the McNaughton definition, whether you use the Durham decision or a variation of it, she was psychotic at the time. I believe she did not know what she was doing. I'm not certain she even knows that she did do it now as we speak.
Okay.
And that it was wrong.
Not certain that she knows that she did do it as we speak. So we're at trial and we have seen video. I think I just did something on that where she said she didn't figure out she didn't figure out it was Gannon and what happened until she and her lawyers put it together. And another time she said, I didn't know it was Gannon until I opened the blanket, which means before she went to trial. And then there's the whole business of afterwards, all the post-defense behavior. I suppose you could explain it in some other ways. But yeah, so Letecia herself actually contradicted what her expert is saying.
You knew that your opinion would be applied to the law in Colorado, and you knew this jury here would be listening to your opinion to see if what you had to say made sense with the law.
Yes,
You've done that to 100 to 200 times, correct?
I would guess,
And
yeah.
I've read your other reports. In your other reports, you define what insanity is in that particular state, and you explain in your report why you think someone was legally insane at the time based on the law.
He did his homework.
Why did you not do that in this
right
case?
from wrong, or what she was doing, that this is not insanity in your
Now she's cross-examining the prosecutor.
state.
Did you write this report, doctor?
Of course, I wrote the report. I wrote, this is not a complete report. I wrote, you know, I wrote it, sent it, and had it typed. Yes.
It's not a complete report? Okay, I hope they explain that.
I cannot tell you who typed it.
Who'd you send it to?
There is an early title that is a preliminary psychiatric impression, and then subsequently modified it to try to include anything that I had left out. If after he saw my initial report, if I had left.
Preliminary psychiatric assessment? Or sorry, preliminary psychiatric impression. Did she diagnose her?
Left anything out that I thought should be there.
Well, what you left out in your initial report was your opinion with regards to insanity, correct?
In my initial communication with him, absolutely. I gave him what I had up until then.
And you requested in your initial evaluation that you wanted an MRI done, an EEG done, as well as a neuropsych exam with several tests that you listed in your report, correct?
Right?
And you wanted those done before you rendered an opinion as to insanity in the state of Colorado, correct?
I wanted it before I testified, yes.
And none of those items got done.
No.
Yet you still issued a second report claiming that she's insane without any definition of why she's insane.
Well, I gave you the definition that she is psychotic and gave you the data to show it, but I did not write it in the form in which I would if I had all of those data to include in it. And I did not have them. And, you know, I could not include what, as it was my understanding that the court refused to finance the EEG and the MRI and the neuropsychological testing.
Here.
So I gave you as much as I could from what.
Let's
you
talk
were
about
allowed.
that. On October 13th, 2022, you were scheduled to come testify to this court about why you wanted an EEG and MRI done, correct? You recall that?
No, but, say that again?
Do you not recall being asked to come testify with regards to why you needed an EEG done and an MRI done in this case?
I do not know what you are referring to. I have no idea what you're referring to, because
you-
I
were-
would have been pleased to at least talk on the phone to the judge or whatever. I begged to have these things done. I can only tell you that. And I would have spoken to anyone who wanted to talk to me about it.
Well, you were contacted well before February of 2022 on this case, correct?
Absolutely.
And you were contacted before Ms. Stout pled not guilty by reason of insanity, correct?
Right?
And she pled not guilty by reason of insanity on February 11th of 2022, correct?
I'm assuming your dates are correct, yeah.
And you didn't do anything on this evaluation until November of 2022?
I worked as
Hold on. February 11th, 2022 was when she pled not guilty by reason of insanity. But this doctor didn't I don't want to say get involved because I don't know. But she didn't do any interview with Letecia until November 2022. So, so who diagnosed her? Who decided that there was enough there to plead not guilty by reason of insanity if the doctor hadn't interviewed her yet. I feel like I'm missing something. Okay.
Hard as I could to get these. In fact, I called the neurologist for free, Dr. James Marikangas, to discuss the case because I could not get funding from this court to get these tests done. So I called and discussed it with him. I contacted Catherine Yeager, Dr. Yeager, the neuropsychologist with whom I've worked for 30 years, and worked with her and spoke with her and got as much data as I possibly could. And I begged her attorneys to get this. And their answer was that the court would not pay for those tests to be done. I had never heard, in fact, I said, I've never heard of this before, but it did not occur to me to pick up the phone and to call the judge. I didn't even know who the judge was, but I was told I could not get this and that I must get something in by then. So I didn't even call my initial contact a complete report on it. But I'm trying to see what I called it. I called it initial, I think, initial psychiatric impression, right?
Right, yeah, because you wanted that information before you rendered an opinion as to insanity, correct?
That is true.
And, Your Honor, at this time, I'd like the court to take judicial notice that on October 13, 2022, the request to have an EEG done, an MRI done by defense was withdrawn, and we did not go to hearing on that.
Mr.
Holy crap.
Delaney, defense position? Court will take judicial notice that on October 13 of 2022, the defense withdrew its request for an EEG in this case,
Why?
As well as MRI.
as well as an MRI.
Were you ever told that?
This is news to me right now. So
And of course, if this would have been done, it would have been 3 years after the crime happened.
it would have been later, yes.
And so there'd be a gap between the time of the crime and the time the MRI and EEG were done.
Yes.
A lot of things could have happened in the jail within that time period that may have caused damage to Ms. Stauch's head.
This is just speculative. It would have been extremely helpful to get those data and then to see whether they looked like the.
Oh, that was clever. So I think that he started this by setting up for later so that if she was found guilty and it went to appeal, he's laying that groundwork. Look, anything could have happened in the jail. So maybe the MRI, you know, it's not so important that it's worth launching an appeal over or something, right? But then the way she answers, it's like, oh, it's really important. But she doesn't have it, but it's really important. So yeah, oh, that was clever.
Kind of material that was something that would have been long lasting or something that was sudden, so that I can't really speculate on that. I did want it done then, and it mattered then.
But it didn't get done, and yet you still rendered your opinion, didn't you?
I rendered and I've described what I know about the case, and I've given you my opinion of it. Yes.
Despite what you wrote in your book, guilty by reason of insanity. You're familiar with your book, right? That it's easy to fake mental illnesses, especially when it comes to dissociative identity disorder. And that's why you want collateral information like an MRI or an EEG to corroborate, correct?
The expert herself, and she really is an expert. She really is a leader in that field. The expert herself writes in her book that dissociative identity disorder is easy to fake. So, wow.
It's not exactly correct. You don't get that to corroborate dissociative identity disorder. No, you get that to corroborate neurologic or neuropsychological impairment. No, you don't get that for dissociation.
Okay. So she explained why she could diagnose dissociative identity without the MRI and EEG to rule out the other things. But oh boy, that just seems like such thin ice.
And so all you had to go on is really Ms. Stauch's self-reporting to you and the forensic interview that you conducted.
Well, that's simple. I can't go along with that. That's all we had. But we did not have the additional neuropsychological and neurological data that I would very much have liked and I would still like. And I had no idea that this was ever withdrawn. It was my idea, or it was my understanding, that the court had refused to grant the funding to have these things done, which in my experience is a first.
Well, now you know what happened though. So why do you keep saying, you know what happened?
I
The
don't,
court just took judicial notice that the defense withdrew their request.
I know what you're telling me, but it would be presumptuous for me to say, I know now. You've put me in the middle of a debate that I can't enter into.
When you advised him that you felt there was enough evidence for the defendant to plead not guilty by reason of insanity, what did you base that on?
I based that on, probably in my own head, I based it on the McNaughton rule, which would be that she did not know the nature of what she had.
No. You can't base that on McNaughton. You've never spoken with her. What the heck is she basing it on?
Done, and or that it was wrong, and also subsequently, after discussing it with Mr. Tellini, based on the Durham decision that she did not have control over what she was doing, that she could not conform her behavior to that which the law required.
How did you know that back in February of 2022 when you hadn't interviewed her until November of 2022?
I'm sorry, I would have to look over what I had looked at and what I had, what I had reviewed up to the time, and I'm sorry, I can't give you the dates so that we can.
Well, did you review anything prior to talking to Mr. Tellini for the first time about the defendant changing her plea to not guilty by reason of insanity?
I'm not aware of his having changed a plea. No, I assumed, in fact, when he called me, that he thought that probably that there was an insanity defense here. And I did not think that he had one, he was pleading what, not guilty first and then changed it to.
Can't imagine a lawyer actually going ahead and changing a plea in that manner without some sort of, sorry, I keep forgetting, I'm on camera, I keep forgetting to look up, without some sort of evidence or a diagnosis or something. So I'm still wondering, when exactly was she diagnosed?
NGRA? I don't know.
You don't remember?
No, it isn't that I don't remember. It's that I assumed when he called me that he suspected that there was that she was suffering from a severe mental disorder that conformed to the criteria for insanity.
And when that happens, you had done,
Okay, I'm confused again. So when the defense lawyer calls and you're an expert, you assume that they're calling you about your area of expertise, that they have a client or a situation that requires your specific expertise. But she's saying that it conforms to certain guidelines. I still am, there's something missing. Like, he can't say that without a diagnosis. He can't, as a lawyer, he can say, I think my client's nuts. I want to call in an expert and get an expert opinion. But he can't himself say, oh yeah, it fits the legal definition of insanity, and we're going to change her plea based on that, and then get an expert after the fact. There has to be something more substantial for a lawyer to do that. So this is weird.
death penalty people are the worst of the worst.
Oh, it depends on what your state is like. No, it doesn't depend on the worst of the worst. It depends on what the law is in your state and the humanity of your state. It doesn't depend on the worst of the worst.
So
So she just gave us insight into her belief system.
I beg your
people,
pardon?
are you pro death penalty?
I really try not to take a position on it. I just kind of call the shots as I see them in terms of the,
You know, she walked into that one, right?
I haven't seen this and I don't know if it exists, but okay, because the attorney asked me whether I would do this. And I did. If you want me to explain what happened, I,
Let me, in
how I,
between two of us.
yeah, kids who were around where she lived said that at times she sounded like a man and that she asked to be called Billy. That was what they knew. And that's what they told me. And so they said,
So just, I hope the jury's catching this, that other people noticed that this person had multiple personalities and asked to be called by a different name, talked differently, behaved differently.
This is back in the 1980s, just so, is that fair?
84 or 86. Yeah. Well, that tells you how long it took me to even think maybe this could be it. But
Back in the 80s, this was just emerging, and there really was a lot of skepticism. I think there still is skepticism about it now. But back then it wasn't even in the DSM.
I said to her, there are people who say that sometimes you want to be called Billy or what have you. And she said, yes, people have told me this, but I don't know. And I said,
So she's describing this case and saying that the client is saying, yeah, people have told me that I've done this. They've told me that I've asked to go by different names or told me that I talk like a man. When have you ever heard that or heard about that in Letecia's case? When she describes what she thinks are symptoms, she'll tell you, oh yeah, the protector comes out or Maria comes out, or oh, sometimes I go into it and out of it, and oh yeah, I use different names. There's a qualitative difference there between, oh yeah, I do all this stuff and I use different names, and I have no idea I do that, and somebody's telling me that I do that. That's really different. We haven't seen anything like that with Letecia.
said, many people who have been through the kinds of things that you've been through, many people have been bothered, like sexually by other people or whatever. Um, Has anything like this ever happened to you, whatever? No, Dr. Lewis, never. Nothing like this ever happened to me. So finished, done with evaluation, right? But no, it did not happen. And no one ever did this. And
Actually, one thing I can say in Leticia's, I don't know if it's in Leticia's favor because it's not in respect to guilt or innocence, but these stories about childhood trauma, it's not unusual that nobody knows. It's not unusual that she doesn't tell a doctor or a friend or clergy or anybody. It's actually quite common for victims to never tell. Some people don't disclose ever in their life. So to say, gee, we never heard about this kind of trauma, childhood trauma before, especially if it's sexual in nature, then that's not unusual.